degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm Anne-Marie Walsh. In Harrow, the A404 remains closed both ways. That's because of flooding between Peterborough Road and the Northwick Park roundabouts. And in Hanwell, the Uxbridge Road is closed westbound. That's for emergency repairs near to Lower Boston Road. Only one Woolwich ferry is running at the moment. That's because of technical issues. And onto the trains, there's no service on London Overground between Euston and Kilburn High Road. And South Western Railway have delays of up to 15 minutes between Waterloo and Wimbledon following a track fault.
This is LBC.
For blowing away the cobwebs, for putting some fresh air into
Oh, 973. This is LBC. Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
9 minutes before 8 is the time. We'll be hearing about this levelling up agenda from Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick in just a moment. Let's take one call, though, on this conversation about the attempt to crack down on racism as regarding football supporters. I don't know if we can call them fans, people who watch football. Alex in Watford, you're on the radio. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. You've just tried to defend the Prime Minister of what he said in the past.
Yes.
And I'd like to put it to you. Boris Johnson is the Enoch Powell of the Conservative Party.
Well, that's utter nonsense. I'll give you one sentence to explore or explain that, and then I'll get my response.
Well, you give me the chance
Yes.
to say something?
Because that's fairly inflammatory and, in my book, totally wrong, but I have to afford you the opportunity to explain why you'd say that.
Enoch Powell made a speech. It stuck with him for all his political career.
Right.
And I won't say the speech, or I can say that reminded
It was so-called river. Well, it wasn't so. It was referred to as the Rivers of Blood speech. Yes, 1968.
The River of Blood speech.
Yes.
Singular.
And are you honestly saying that a remark that Boris Johnson made, which I'm not seeking to defend, you're honestly saying that a comment as a journalist, he wasn't a politician, let alone a senior politician, which Enoch Powell was. You're honestly saying that's at the same level, Alex?
Yes, he said it.
Good
Nick.
God.
He said that.
Good God. So what you're saying, and this is a point I was trying to make about Sir Keir Starmer, everybody's getting furious. Why are you conflating racism with an attack on the royal family? I'm not. When politicians are younger, and I appreciate Boris Johnson was probably in his 30s when he made that comment, they say or do stupid things. Sir Keir Starmer flirted with the idea of disbanding the royal family. Are you honestly telling me that were Sir Keir Starmer to be the Prime Minister, and God forbid we lost a senior member of the royal family, and he quite rightly made an address on behalf of the nation, that we should then say, oh, why is he saying that about, and I won't insert the name. Well, he doesn't even like it. People say, so I'm not saying racism is the same as attack. People say when they're younger things they regret. It's a fact of life. Are you writing off Sir Keir Starmer for the rest of his life? Are you writing off Boris Johnson for the rest of his life? You cannot move forward like this. People say dopey things, they then learn from them and they put it right. If Boris Johnson has the solution to racism in football, which, by the way, I don't think this idea is, if he has it, we should listen to him, Alex, shouldn't we? Not go back and try and make him look like a modern-day Enoch Powell. Alex.
Right. You're comparing apples and pears.
Well,
racism is a cancer. It's got to be taken out of society.
No, I've just said I'm not likening racism to attack. I've just said it. What I'm using it for is that people, years past, I think Sir Keir Starmer was in his teens when he looked at the idea of disbanding the royal family. People do stupid things when they're young. If they then come up, for the love of God, if a surgeon had a cure for cancer, but in an earlier life he'd been a pickpocket, are we not going to take his idea? Thank you. Maybe the penny has dropped on that. I'm grateful for your call, Alex. Thank you. I have to say, I don't think there's any comparison, but I respect your view, although I think it's very wrong. OK, shall we move to other matters? The exciting levelling up agenda. Here we are, his name's again. Boris Johnson will promise voters in the South his flagship strategy to level up will make the whole nation richer, not poorer. To Robert Jenrick, who's Housing Secretary, and joins me now. My understanding, of course, is if you have to level up, someone has to rather go down, don't they? Secretary of State, good morning.
Hi, good morning. No, that's not right. We're a one-nation government. We want to spread opportunity and prosperity to all parts of the country. And we think this is a genuine win-win for everyone, regardless of where you live. We want to ensure a young person growing up in Wolverhampton, where I am this morning, has all the same opportunities as someone growing up in London. And we also want to redress some of those economic imbalances across the country, because that's the way that we help the overheated London and the South East to prosper as well. So there's less pressure on housing. Young people can get on the housing ladder.
Mr. Jenrick, you are robbing Peterborough to pay Preston, and you've been caught out in Chesham and Amersham, haven't you, where you lost what was a safe Conservative seat. That is the reality.
No, not at all. We want to ensure that there is better public transport, better public services, higher quality skills training for people in all parts of the United Kingdom. This is a one-nation government. We want to represent Peterborough, Preston, and
you're not representing
London,
Chesham and Amersham, are you?
Well, we have a Conservative council in Buckinghamshire that's doing a great job.
You haven't got a Conservative MP.
Because that parliamentary constituency at the next general election.
Because you've pumped all the money into the north.
I think the point that the Prime Minister is making, Nick, which you're referring to, is that if you want to relieve some of the pressure on public transport, on housing in a place like Buckinghamshire, where undoubtedly that is an issue that many residents feel strongly about, then part of the way to do that is to ensure that that young person growing up in Wolverhampton doesn't feel the need to come to London to get on in life, but actually can access really high quality skills training and jobs and housing where they grew up. Okay. And that kind of more united, more equal country is what we're setting out to achieve.
All right. On a related matter, you'll be aware of Henry Dimbleby's review into new taxes on sugar and salt, the so-called snack taxes. How is it levelling up to put an additional roughly £180 on a family's shopping bill, adding 87p to a packet of Frosties? How's that levelling up then, Secretary of State?
Well, that isn't the government's policy, Nick. It's an independent report.
Oh, you're not. So you've rejected it?
Well, we've only received it this morning.
No, let's just clarify. Hold on. So we've got an old Etonian. We've got an old Etonian telling people they should spend 87p more for a box of Frosties. What's your view on that?
Well, it's for the Environment Secretary to read the report.
No, but what's your view on it? I remind you, you are the Communities Secretary.
Set out our food strategy.
Yeah.
I think you have to be very cautious before putting burdens on members of the public, particularly those on lower incomes. That's my long-standing view. This is a substantial report that's been received this morning, and so we're going to consider it carefully and set out our national food strategy in the coming months, which will address some of these issues like health inequalities, like how we do tackle obesity, how we can all educate.
But you wouldn't want to see 87
to
pence on a box of
lifestyles.
Frosties, would you, Mr. Jenrick?
Well, I think you do have to be very careful about going down that road, because I don't want to make life more difficult for people on low incomes. But as I say, we're not going to comment on the individual recommendations on the morning that the report has been released. It's going to be something we'll think carefully about and set out our views later in the year.
And one other important matter, you might or might not have had sight of today's Financial Times. Their front page story is that in some places the so-called pinging, or the NHS app, means that 25% of staff are absent. This is in some NHS hospitals. The biggest car factory in the country has 700 workers currently off, and in some instances trains are being cancelled, and possibly buses as well, because drivers aren't turning up because they've been pinged. Look, we know we needed it, but doesn't it have to be rather more fine-tuned, Mr. Jenrick?
Yes, I think we've accepted that. It is important that we have the app, that we take it seriously, that when we do get those messages, we act accordingly. But we're going to give further thought to how we can ensure that it is a proportionate response.
What does that further thought mean?
Well, the government's going to be setting out its plans in the coming weeks, so I'm not going to preempt those. But we've indicated, Nick, that for those who have been double vaccinated, there are opportunities to take a more proportionate approach. Fortunately, 84% of the population has now had at least one vaccine. 2/3 of people have had two vaccines, so that time is rapidly approaching.
And on Monday, lastly, are the government saying, please go back to your place of work if it's an office or whatever it might be? Please, now you can go back to your place of work, or are the government saying, actually, no, stay at home? What are the government saying as regards to that?
Well, we're saying that as a result of the vaccine rollout, we have the scope to move back to a period of greater normality, but we need to do so cautiously, because we're going to be living with the virus for a long time, and cases we can all see are rising very substantially. What this means is we have to exercise a degree of personal responsibility on topics like going into the office or wearing face masks, and come to our own judgments on that, as will employers. If you can work from home, but some people will judge that that's the right thing.
So it's down to the individual, the employer.
It is down to the individual, which I think you and I would both agree is the right thing to do, because we should be trusting people.
But what if they don't turn up for work?
Very well versed in these issues. They've been, living with this now for over a year, and we're asking people to exercise their own good judgment.
But lastly, as Secretary of State for local government as well, if we have a local authority where perhaps there's 25% of staff on Monday who just don't turn up at their council offices, city hall, town hall, what is the chief executive meant to do?
Well, they will be thinking carefully about how they can deliver public services efficiently, and we are concerned about absences as a result of being pinged, for example, and so we're working with local councils to make sure that we can keep on collecting the bins and doing all the really important things that local government does. That's one of the reasons why we do need to move to a more proportionate approach with respect to the app. But local councils themselves will come to sensible judgments as to whether their staff need to come into the office or not. Actually, as a result of the pandemic, many councils have concluded that they can move to more flexible working patterns, and that's probably all for the good. It will mean that people can, find life easier, can handle childcare, can have more flexible working lives. We don't expect everything to return exactly to the way it was before COVID.
Grateful for your time this morning, Robert Jenrick. Thank you. Your Housing Secretary appearing here on LBC 2 minutes after 8 News is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, the government's being urged to introduce a tax on sugar and salt to encourage healthier eating in England. The National Food Strategy report, which was commissioned by ministers, says the levy could raise £3 billion a year and would help to expand things like free school meals. It warns that poor diets are contributing to 64,000 deaths a year. Andrew Burton runs a cafe in York. He isn't sure the plan will work.
We've looked